The February wind sliced through Cedar Rapids, rattling the windows of the two-story colonial on Maple Grove Drive. Susan Brown stood quietly in the living room she'd called home for 17 years, watching the real estate inspector as he moved from room to room, flashlight in hand, clipboard under his arm. At 42. Susan carried the weight of time in her face, 7 long winters of waiting, of searching for the daughter who never came home. Mrs. Brown, the inspector, Tom Henderson, called from below. "Can you come down to the basement for a moment?" Susan took a breath and stepped onto the narrow wooden stairs. Her hand gripped the railing. The basement had always made her uneasy, a stretch of unfinished concrete walls and exposed pipes. Richard, her ex-husband, had once promised to fix it up, but that never happened. After Melissa disappeared in October of 2002, Susan stopped coming down here at all. Something about it just felt wrong. Henderson stood by the far wall, knocking his knuckles against the concrete in a steady rhythm. "Hear that?" he asked. Tap, 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 then hollow. "That's not normal," he said, running his hand along the surface. "There's a void behind this wall, maybe 3 feet deep. Not standard for homes built in '85. Susan felt her pulse quicken. "What does that mean?" "Could be nothing," he replied. "Maybe old foundation work. Or a sealed-off crawl space." He pulled out his tape measure, checking the dimensions. "But here's what's strange. The exterior dimensions of your basement don't match the inside. You're missing about 40 square feet. He marked the wall with chalk. "Right here." Susan touched the concrete. Her fingertips trembled. "Richard did something down here in 2001. Said it was to reinforce the foundation after the flooding." Henderson ran his flashlight across the wall's edge. "See this seam? This section was poured separately. Someone added it, deliberately." He pressed gently. "And I think there's a door here, just hidden under a layer of concrete." Susan looked at him. "Can you open it?" He hesitated. "We should probably call the police first." "No." Her voice came out firmer than expected. "I've lived in this house for 7 years, not knowing this was here. I need to see what's behind it." 20 minutes later, Henderson had chipped away enough of the concrete to reveal a steel door frame, with a gray deadbolt lock painted to match the foundation. "This wasn't done by an amateur," he said. "Whoever built this, they knew what they were doing. This kind of door costs thousands." Susan watched as he forced the lock open with a crowbar. The door creaked, then gave way with a heavy metallic groan. Cold air rushed out. It smelled musty, old. Susan felt her stomach tighten. Henderson pointed his flashlight inside. They both stopped. It was a small room, maybe 8 feet wide, 12 long. The walls were finished with drywall. A bare bulb hung from the ceiling. In the corner was a twin mattress, pink and purple comforter, the one Susan had bought for Melissa's 13th birthday. A small shelf held books, a few stuffed animals, and a portable CD player. On the floor lay a backpack, covered in band patches, the same one Melissa had the day she vanished. Susan stepped forward slowly. Her legs barely supported her. She picked up the backpack and unzipped it. Inside was Melissa's student ID from Kennedy High, her hairbrush, still tangled with strands of dark hair. A water bottle, half full. Susan's heart ached. Melissa had been here, in this house, in this basement, while Susan slept upstairs. While Richard told her he was searching the neighborhood, while the whole town came together to look for her. "Mrs. Brown," Henderson said gently, "we need to call the police. Please don't touch anything else." But Susan was already holding something else. A spiral notebook. Purple cover. Melissa's handwriting across the front. "Property of Melissa Brown. Private. Keep out." Susan opened it, tears blurring her vision. October 15th, 2002. I don't understand what's going on. He said this is just temporary, that I need to stay here until things settle down. He said Mom knows I'm here, that she agreed this is best. But I heard her crying last night, and I don't think she knows at all. Susan's knees gave way. Henderson caught her, helped her sit on the floor. Who? Susan whispered. Who is he? She turned the page, October 16th, 2002, second day. He brought food twice. Sandwiches and juice boxes like I'm a little kid. Keep saying I'm safe. That people are looking for me and I have to stay hidden. Said someone was following me after basketball practice. That the police are involved. But why can't I talk to them? Why can't I see Mom? And he said soon. Very soon. I want to believe him. Susan turned the pages slowly, dread building with every entry. As the days stretched into weeks and weeks into months, the handwriting changed. The letters became uneven, rushed, filled with fear. December 25th, 2002. Christmas. I can hear voices upstairs. People laughing. Mom's crying. I tried banging on the walls, but no one came. He must have made them soundproof. He brought me a slice of pie and said it was from Mom. Said she wanted me to know she was thinking about me. But if she knows I'm here, why doesn't she come see me? Nothing makes sense anymore. Susan's hands shook as she kept reading. February 3rd, 2003. 4 months now. He says the investigation is still going, that it's not safe yet. But I don't think that's true. Today he brought me new clothes and told me to keep my voice down when he visits. He's acting nervous. Something's wrong. I tried the door again after he left. It's locked from the outside. There's no way out. While Susan read, Henderson had quietly called 911. Now, faint sirens echoed in the distance. Susan looked up at him, her face pale and streaked with tears. For 7 years, she said softly, I thought my daughter was gone. I believed someone took her from the street. She held up the journal. But she was here. Someone kept her in my own basement. Her voice broke. And she thought I knew. She thought I agreed to this. The final entry was dated March 10th, 2003, 5 months after Melissa vanished. I heard them arguing last night. He was angry, saying things were getting complicated, that people were asking too many questions. Then I heard Mom's voice. She was crying, asking where I was. She doesn't know. He's been lying to both of us. I have to get out. I have to warn her. Tonight, when he brings dinner, I'm going to scream. Even if the walls are soundproofed, I have to try. That was the last page. There was no explanation of what happened next. No clue where Melissa went after those 5 months. But one truth was impossible to ignore. Someone Susan trusted. Someone with full access to her home. Had built this room and used it to hide her daughter. Detective Sarah Chun was the first officer inside the basement. At 35, she'd worked countless cases, but this one immediately stood apart. She documented every detail as forensic technicians set up lights and began their work. Mrs. Brown, Chun said gently, who had access to this basement before Melissa disappeared? Susan swallowed hard. My ex-husband, Richard. He said he was fixing the foundation. He was devastated when Melissa went missing. He barely slept. She paused. A new realization hit her. But we never actually had flooding down here. I just believed him. Chen made a note. Anyone else? Richard's brother, Mark. He's a contractor. He helped with the work. Susan hesitated. And Coach Patterson. David Patterson. Melissa's basketball coach. He was here often that fall. After she disappeared, he organized the biggest search effort. Her eyes widened. He had a key to the house. Detective Chun glanced at the steel door, then back at Susan. This room wasn't built on impulse. It required planning, money, and time. And according to your daughter's journal, she knew who did this. She trusted him. Susan felt the ground shift beneath her. For years, she believed the stranger was responsible. But the truth was far worse. Melissa had been alive, held beneath Susan's bedroom, by someone close enough to stand beside her at vigils and search meetings. As police cars lined the street outside, one question haunted Susan more than any other. Where was Melissa now? And was she still alive? Detective Chen spent hours in the hidden room as evidence was carefully collected. Every detail mattered. The journal was sealed into an evidence bag, already pointing toward a much larger investigation. A crime scene technician stepped forward. Found this behind the mattress. Looks like she tried to hide it. Inside the plastic bag was a folded piece of notebook paper. Across the front, written in shaky block letters, was one word, "Mom." The note was short. The handwriting started out neat, then grew shaky and rushed. "Mom, if you find this, I'm so sorry for everything. I know now he lied about you knowing I was here. He said awful things about you, but I should have known better. He's not who we thought he was. He's planning something. I heard him talking on the phone about the next step and some facility upstate. I think he's going to move me. Please don't blame yourself. I love you. I'm going to fight. Tell Dad I'm sorry. I believe the lies about him too." Melissa Detective Chun read the words carefully. Cold fury settled in her chest. This wasn't just confinement. It was psychological manipulation, cutting Melissa off from everything she trusted and turning her against her parents through carefully planted lies. "Webb," she said firmly, handing the note to the crime tech. "Get this to the lab. I want a full analysis, handwriting, timeline, any trace evidence we can find." Upstairs, Susan sat silently at the kitchen table. A victim advocate offered her coffee and quiet reassurance, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on a photo still held by a magnet on the fridge, Melissa smiling at 14. Beneath a small basketball-shaped clip, Detective Chun stepped into the kitchen. "Mrs. Brown, I need to ask you a few difficult questions about the time leading up to Melissa's disappearance." Susan nodded slowly. "Anything. What was Melissa like that fall?" For the first time since the discovery, something returned to Susan's expression: softness, memory. "She was everything to me. After the divorce in 2001, she became my whole world. She lived for basketball. Spent hours practicing in the driveway. Her dream was to make varsity by sophomore year." Susan smiled faintly. She was trusting. Maybe too trusting. Always believed the best in people. She volunteered at the animal shelter on Saturdays. Helped neighbors carry groceries. Richard used to say she didn't know how to lie because she couldn't imagine someone else would. Chun took notes. "What about Coach Patterson?" "David Patterson?" "He was like a mentor. Coached her in 8th grade. When she made the freshman team at Kennedy, she was excited he'd moved up to varsity assistant. He told her if she worked hard, she'd be starting by junior year." Susan hesitated. He gave her extra practices. One-on-one training after school. Sometimes just the two of them in the gym. Chun looked up. "Did that ever concern you?" "No," Susan said. "There were usually other students, other coaches nearby. And David was married with a daughter Melissa's age over at Roosevelt High. He always seemed safe." But her hands tightened. "Now I'm remembering things I didn't think mattered back then." That summer, before she went missing, Melissa got quieter. Stopped wanting to go to practice. When I asked, she said Coach Patterson was just pushing her really hard. That it was overwhelming. Chun leaned in. "Did she say anything about wanting to quit?" Susan nodded slowly. "A couple weeks before she vanished. She said maybe basketball wasn't worth it anymore. That Patterson expected too much. I thought it was just high school stress. I told her to push through. That coach believed in her. I told her to keep going. Her voice broke. I made her keep going. A uniformed officer appeared in the doorway. Detective Chen, we have Richard Brown and his brother, Mark, in separate rooms at the station. Still trying to track down Coach Patterson. His wife says he left for a conference in Chicago 3 days ago, but the event has no record of him registering. Chen stood. Get a warrant for Patterson's phone and financial records. I want every location he's visited in the last 72 hours. She turned back to Susan. Mrs. Brown, I'm going to need you to come to the station. Walk me through everything you remember about October 2002. Even the smallest detail could matter now. At the Cedar Rapids Police Department, Richard Brown sat in interview room and his hands trembled. His face had gone pale. At 50, he looked like someone who had aged 20 years in a day. Detective Chen watched him through the one-way glass, then entered the room. Mr. Brown, she said calmly. Thank you for coming in. His voice was raw. Where's Melissa? You told Susan we found signs she was alive? We're trying to find her, Chen said. Right now, we're collecting evidence. I need to ask you about the basement renovation you did back in 2001. Richard rubbed his face, trying to steady himself. It was just foundation work. We had water coming in after heavy rain. I reinforced the walls. My brother helped. He's a contractor. Knows what he's doing. Chen opened a folder and laid it on the table. Did you build a sealed room during that time? What? His eyes widened. No, why would I do that? Inside the folder were photos from the hidden chamber. Richard stared at them, frozen. That's Melissa's blanket. This wasn't casual work, Chen said. It's professionally built. Steel door, ventilation, soundproofing. Whoever made this had knowledge and time. I didn't build that, Richard's voice cracked. I swear to God, I didn't even know it was there. Mark and I worked on the east and north walls. That room. It's not in that section of the basement. We were down there for maybe a week total, Richard said, his voice low. Then I had to travel for work, and Mark finished the rest on his own. He paused, eyes narrowing as something clicked. Wait, Mark was down there by himself for 3 days. He said he was just doing the ceiling and cleaning up. Detective Chen made a note. So your brother had unsupervised access to the basement for 3 full days? Yes, Richard said slowly. But Mark wouldn't. He's my brother. He loved Malia. The certainty in his voice wavered. Chen noticed. In interview room B, Mark Brown had a very different presence. Calm, collected. Contractor's hands folded neatly on the table. He hadn't asked about Melissa once. Mr. Brown, Chen began. Tell me about the basement renovation at your brother's house. Mark nodded casually. Standard job. Sealed a few cracks, reinforced some walls. Nothing too technical. Did you install any additional structures? He raised an eyebrow. Like what? A sealed room. With a steel door. Mark's face didn't change, but Chen noticed. The stillness was more revealing than panic might have been. No. Why would I build something like that? Chen slid a stack of photos across the table. Mark glanced at them, and for a brief second, there was a flicker in his eyes. Recognition. This was at Richard's place? He asked. You're saying you didn't know this room existed? I poured concrete where Richard told me to, Mark replied evenly. If there's a room behind that wall, someone else put it there. He leaned back. You should be talking to David Patterson. That guy was at the house all the time that summer, especially when Susan wasn't around. Chen sharpened her attention. What do you mean? I was working there one day when Patterson showed up, Mark explained. Said he needed to drop off some basketball gear for Melissa. But Susan wasn't home. Melissa was at school. He asked if he could wait inside. I told him to come back later. Mark paused. But about 20 minutes later, I saw him coming out of the basement door. Said he was just checking his phone in the shade. He shook his head. But why would someone go into a basement to check their phone? Chun kept her expression neutral. When was this? Late August, maybe early September 2001, the year before Melissa disappeared. The timeline clicked into place. If Patterson had access to the house during the renovation, and time alone in the basement, he could have been the one to build a hidden room. Or at least help someone do it. Chung thought about the journal. Melissa had referred to her captor only as he. Not a stranger. Someone she knew. Someone she had trusted. Double quotes Mr. Brown, Chun said. Where were you on October 15th, 2002? I was working a job in Iowa City, Mark replied quickly. I've got timesheets and witnesses. I wasn't anywhere near Cedar Rapids when she disappeared. Chun made another note. Her mind was racing through the possibilities. The room took time. It required materials, a plan, and crucially, access. Mark had access during construction. Richard had access through the house. David Patterson had a key. And Melissa's trust. Any of them could have helped build it. But only one of them had a reason to keep coming back. To control Melissa. To make her believe her own mother had left her behind. Chun's phone buzzed. A message from the station. Patterson's credit card just pinged, used at a motel outside Des Moines 2 hours ago. Units are en route. She stood. Mr. Brown, don't leave town. As she stepped into the hallway, everything snapped into focus. David Patterson wasn't at a coaching conference. He was running, and people don't run unless they have something they're desperate to hide. Now, the question wasn't just what Patterson had done. It was whether Melissa Brown was still with him. The Sleepy Hollow Motel sat just off Interstate, 80 to 40 minutes west of Des Moines. A faded neon sign blinked over the front office. Hourly rates, free cable. Detective Chun coordinated. With Iowa State Police from her unmarked car as officers. Surrounded room 117, the location tied to Patterson's credit card. Subject vehicle confirmed. In the lot came a voice through the radio. Silver Honda Accord. Iowa plates. Chun took a breath. After 7 years, they might finally be close to the truth. On my count, she said. 3, 2, 1, go. Officers moved in. The door was breached in seconds. Chun followed, weapon drawn. But as soon as she entered the room, she knew it was empty. A duffel bag lay open on the bed. Clothes, toiletries, and the laptop still powered on. The shower was damp. The air thick. He had just left. Trooper Williams checked the bathroom and closet. Probably saw us setting up. But Chun wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on the laptop screen. Her blood ran cold. In the browser history searches for one-way tickets to Mexico. Fake identification. Even how to disappear permanently. She clicked further. A folder labeled project files. Inside. Dozens of photographs. Images of young girls ages 13 to 16. In basement rooms like the one they had found under Susan Brown's house. Different rooms. Different girls. But the setup was the same. Mattresses on concrete floors. Minimal furniture. Steel doors with visible locks. Each photo was labeled with a name and a year. Jennifer, 1999. Ashley, 2000. Kayla, 2001. Melissa, 2002. Detective Chun stared at the screen. Sweet Jesus. Behind her, Trooper Williams leaned in. How many? Chun counted quickly. 14 girls. Across 8 years. Then she clicked on a folder labeled transfers. Inside were spreadsheets, rows of dates, locations, and figures. Payments ranging from $15,000 to $30,000. He wasn't working alone, Chun said quietly. She pulled out her phone and called the Cedar Rapids station. "This is Detective Chun. We need the FBI involved immediately. We're looking at multiple victims, possible interstate trafficking. And get a forensic team to the motel." Patterson left evidence everywhere, which either means he's panicking or he's trying to mislead us. Within 20 minutes, a helicopter landed behind the motel. From it stepped FBI Special Agent Marcus Webb. Crimes Against Children Division, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, and known for dismantling organized trafficking rings. One look at the laptop, and his jaw tightened. "Detective Chun, this is bigger than a single missing child case. These photos, these records, we've been tracking a pattern like this for 6 years." Webb pulled up files on his own tablet. "Across Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, we've had teenage girls vanish from stable homes. No ransom notes. No signs of struggle. No remains. Just gone. 14 unsolved cases. Local departments couldn't connect the dots because it crossed jurisdictions." Chun nodded slowly, feeling the pieces lock into place. David Patterson was likely the connection. But there was no way he acted alone. "These facilities," Webb continued, "require coordination. Someone had to maintain them. Someone funded this. And someone received the girls after the first stage of captivity." He pointed to one of the spreadsheet entries. "See the transfer dates? Most of the girls were held for 3 to 6 months, what we're calling conditioning facilities, before being moved." Chun's voice was quiet. "Moved to where?" "That's what we need to find out," Webb replied. "But based on the money involved, these were high-paying buyers. People who could afford secrecy." He looked up. "Detective, I need everything on Melissa Brown's case. If the pattern holds, she was taken from that basement in March of 2003. The question now is, where did she go? And is she still alive?" Back in Cedar Rapids, Susan Brown sat in her kitchen, now converted into a federal command center. FBI laptops covered the table. Phones rang nonstop. Yellow crime scene tapes sealed off the basement. Susan felt like a stranger in her own home watching. Agents sift through fragments of her daughter's stolen life. Agent Webb arrived just after midnight. He looked exhausted. "Mrs. Brown," he said gently, "we're expanding the investigation. We need to know, were there any other families in Cedar Rapids who lost teenage daughters between 1999 and 2005? Susan's mind raced. "There was Jennifer Martinez," she said. "She disappeared in '99, a year older than Melissa. Police said she ran away, but her mom never believed that. And Kayla Henderson," she added. "She vanished in 2001, right before school started. Her family moved away not long after." Webb pulled up the photos from Patterson's laptop. Susan gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "That's Jennifer. And Kayla. Oh my God. They were real. They were all real." She looked up, horror dawning in her eyes. Jennifer played soccer. Kayla was on the swim team. They all had coaches, adults they trusted. Webb asked, "Did Patterson coach anything beyond basketball?" Susan nodded slowly. "He ran summer camps, multi-sport clinics for middle schoolers. Always recruiting. Always looking for talent." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He had access to hundreds of girls every year." Webb's tone hardened. "We're pulling every record we can, camps, clinics, schools, volunteer programs. But there's more." He showed her another file from the laptop. "This appears to be a client list. Code names, but detailed." He pointed. "The collector, multiple transactions. The doctor managed medical needs and transfers. and the builder responsible for constructing and maintaining the facilities. Susan stared at the screen. One name echoed in her mind. Mark Brown is a contractor, she said. Everyone in town calls him Mark the Builder. He's done renovation work all over Cedar Rapids. The connections were tightening like a noose. David Patterson had access to the girls. Mark Brown had the skills and the opportunity to build the rooms. But the question remained, who was paying for all of it? The answer came at 3 a.m. Iowa State Police had located an abandoned farm property 30 miles outside Cedar Rapids. It was registered to a shell corporation traced by Webb's team to a man named Robert Clean, a wealthy businessman, a longtime board member of Cedar Rapids Youth Athletics, the same group that had named David Patterson Coach of the Year 3 separate times. At sunrise, FBI tactical teams raided the property. What they found turned the case from a local nightmare into a national emergency. The barn had been converted into a fully operational holding facility. 8 separate rooms, each with a bed, bare furniture, steel locks, and mounted cameras. The place was freshly cleaned, but not empty of evidence. Forensic teams recovered hair samples, trace DNA, and most chillingly a handwritten logbook. Entries dated back 6 years. A detailed record of arrivals and departures. And there, among the names, Melissa Brown. Subject M arrived March 12, 2003. Departed August 3, 2003. Destination Northern Facility. Agent Webb studied the logbook, his eyes narrowing. That phrase, Northern Facility, shows up 14 times across all transfer records, he said. These girls weren't sold to individual buyers. They were being moved to one central location. He looked over at Chun. We need to find that facility, now. Just then, Chun's phone buzzed an urgent message from the forensic lab. The DNA analysis from the basement had confirmed traces from 3 people: Melissa, David Patterson, and Mark Brown. But there was also a 4th profile, an unknown male. His DNA matched evidence recovered from the farm property. We have a 3rd accomplice, Chun said. Someone present at both locations. Webb began pulling property records for Robert Clean, the businessman tied to the shell corporation owning the farm. He ran a quick cross-check against geographic data. Clean owned 6 properties, Webb said. 3 states. All rural. All remote. He zoomed in on one that stood out, a large isolated compound in northern Minnesota right near the Canadian border. A decommissioned psychiatric hospital. Lakewood Psychiatric, Webb said. Closed in 1987, Clean bought it in 98 through another shell company. Main building, staff quarters, and 60 acres of forested land. Chun felt a chill settle in her spine. That's it. That's the Northern Facility. Webb was already reaching for his phone. We need search warrants, tactical coordination with Minnesota authorities, medical response teams if victims are being held there. This is going to be a complex recovery operation. Susan Brown burst into the room, panic in her voice. I heard you say Minnesota. You found where they took Melissa? Chun hesitated. She didn't want to give false hope. We've located a property that might be connected. Susan's eyes welled with tears. I don't care what condition she's in. I don't care if she's angry with me for not finding her sooner. I just need to know, is she still alive? Coordination efforts moved quickly. Webb was in constant contact with the FBI field office in Minneapolis while Chun reviewed every document, photo, and timeline again. The operation had grown rapidly. 17 agents assigned, tactical units from 3 states. Federal search warrants in progress, but even with everything in motion, Chun couldn't shake a growing dread. According to the logbook, Most girls spent 3 to 6 months at the farm before being transferred. But there was no record of what happened after the northern facility. No exit dates. No follow-up notes, just silence. Were the girls still there? Or had the record stopped for a reason no one wanted to say out loud? By 7 a.m., dawn had broken over Cedar Rapids. Chun received word. Tactical teams were in position around the Minnesota property. The raid was scheduled for noon to maximize surprise, minimize danger. Then Webb's voice cut through the noise. Detective Patterson's phone just pinged. He's not heading for Mexico. He's going north on Highway 218. He's going to Minnesota. Chun's adrenaline surged through her exhaustion. He's trying to warn them, she said. Or destroy evidence. Or take something with him. Webb nodded grimly. We're not waiting. All teams move in. 1 hour. Chun grabbed her vest and joined the federal convoy as it rolled out. Behind her, Susan stood silently in her kitchen, clutching a photo of 14-year-old Melissa, her face a mix of hope, grief, and a mother's quiet determination. The next chapter of this case wasn't just a rescue. It was a reckoning, because somewhere inside that old psychiatric hospital was the truth, and Chun knew it wasn't going to be easy to hear. The convoy cut through the frozen Minnesota landscape, past snow-covered farmland and ice-glazed roads. In the lead vehicle, Detective Chun sat beside Agent Webb, studying satellite images of the facility. The Lakewood Psychiatric Hospital sprawled across 60 forested acres. A 4-story brick building with barred windows and a crumbling exterior. It hadn't housed a patient in over 2 decades, but its design still spoke of confinement and control. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures in the East Wing, Webb reported. His earpiece lived with surveillance feeds. 12 distinct sources. Maybe more. Low electricity use. They're trying to stay off-grid. Chun pulled up blueprints. The East Wing was originally the long-term care unit. Secure rooms, minimal windows. It's the perfect cover. She looked up. They didn't even have to alter the building. No one questions a locked psych ward. A voice crackled through the radio, the tactical coordinator. All units. Visual confirmation. David Patterson's vehicle just entered through the north gate. He's alone, carrying a large duffel bag. He's here to destroy evidence, Chun said. Or pay someone off. Webb didn't hesitate. All teams move in. Now. We can't risk losing what's inside that building. The raid unfolded with precision. FBI tactical units approached from 3 angles. Surveillance drones tracked Patterson's movements as he entered the building. Helicopters hovered overhead, capturing every angle inside that compound. The truth about what happened to Melissa Brown and the other missing girls was finally within reach. Chun followed the entry team through the main doors of the abandoned hospital, her weapon drawn, every sense on high alert. The building felt heavy with silence, the kind that settled deep in old walls. The smell hit first disinfectant, mixed with something older, stale, and human. The corridor of the East Wing stretched ahead. Steel doors lined both sides, each one with a small, reinforced observation window. Through the first, Chun spotted movement. A young woman, maybe 20, turned sharply toward the sound of boots. FBI, Chun called out. We're here to help. You're safe now. The tactical team began opening doors, one after another. Behind each was a girl, some physically healthy, others malnourished, all of them visibly traumatized. Their eyes showed disbelief, confusion, and the faintest flicker of hope. They were between 17 and 23, and every one of them had been waiting for this moment, without knowing if it would ever come. Chun moved quickly from room to room. She held up photos. Is anyone here named Melissa Brown? From the last door down the hall, A voice called out soft, hesitant. "Melissa's in the isolation wing. They moved her last month." Chun's heart jumped. Following the directions, she reached a sealed corridor. The doors here were heavier, reinforced. Keypads lined the walls. The tactical team bypassed them. Inside, the hallway was dim. 4 rooms. The first 3 were empty, recently cleaned. But the last door was different. Scratched into the metal, worn by years of effort, were the words, "I am Melissa Brown. I am real. I exist." Chun opened the door slowly. There, sitting on the floor, was Melissa Brown, now 21, her hair long, her face thin, but her eyes locked onto Chun with quiet intensity. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Melissa's voice broke the silence, dry and weak from disuse. "Are you real? Or is this another test?" Chun crouched beside her and holstered her weapon. "I'm real. My name is Detective Sarah Chun. Your mother sent me." Melissa's face crumpled. "My mom, Susan?" Her voice cracked. "They told me she died. They said everyone was gone, that no one was coming. Your mom is alive. She never stopped searching. She's waiting for you back in Cedar Rapids." Melissa began to cry, quiet, stunned tears that had been held back for too long. Chun moved gently. "We found your journal in the basement. We know what happened. Melissa, you're safe now." Footsteps echoed as paramedics arrived with stretchers and supplies. Chun helped Melissa to her feet carefully. She was unsteady, her body weakened from years of confinement. "How many girls are here?" Chun asked softly. 3 now," Melissa said. "There used to be more, but sometimes they take girls away. They called it graduation." Her voice dropped. "We never saw them again, I think. Graduation meant something terrible." Webb appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Detective, we found Patterson. He was in the admin wing, trying to burn file cabinets. We stopped him, but some records were lost." He hesitated, "and we found Robert Clean. He was hiding in the basement. Had a briefcase full of cash and fake passports." Chun felt it settle, everything they'd suspected. "They were preparing to disappear," she said. Webb nodded. "The moment we found that basement in Cedar Rapids, they knew the network was exposed. They were trying to run." As the rescued women received medical care, Chun walked through the hospital's administrative wing with the FBI forensic team. What they uncovered was staggering. The surviving records documented a 10-year operation. Over 40 young women had passed through this facility. Each file detailed where they were taken from, physical and psychological notes, training progress, even preferences from intended recipients. The financial records revealed even more. The operation had generated over $2 million profits split among multiple conspirators. But what shocked Chun most was what they found in a locked safe in Clean's office. Contracts, official-looking paperwork on letterhead. From adoption agencies, foster networks, and medical facilities. Webb explained they didn't just hide in the shadows. They used real institutions. They presented these girls as domestic workers, as brides, even to desperate families who wouldn't ask too many questions about documents. The conditioning facilities like the Cedar Rapids basement and the Iowa farm had one goal: break the girls' spirits before they were transferred here. The hospital had served as the final stop, the place where they were prepared to be placed. Chun looked down the corridor, remembering Melissa's face. What about the girls who weren't compliant? The ones who didn't break? Melissa had said some girls simply disappeared. Webb didn't respond. He didn't have to. The forensic team soon confirmed the unspoken fear. In the old hospital pharmacy, tucked behind rusted equipment, they found a crematorium illegally installed. Recently used. The implication was undeniable. Not all of the girls had survived. By nightfall, The northern facility was secure, but the damage left behind would take far longer to understand, let alone heal. 13 young women, including Melissa Brown, were transported to hospitals in Minneapolis for medical care and psychological support. David Patterson and Robert Clean were in federal custody, already hiring attorneys and refusing to speak. But the case against them was overwhelming. The facility, the files, the survivor statements, and the digital trail Patterson had left behind. Chun stood in the hospital parking lot, watching the last ambulance disappear into the dark. Her phone rang. It was Susan Brown. "Did you find her?" Susan asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "Please, tell me you found my daughter." "We found her, Mrs. Brown," Chun said gently. "Melissa is alive. She's being taken to Minneapolis General. She's going to need time and a lot of support. But she survived." Chun paused. "She's not the same girl who disappeared 7 years ago. What she's been through has changed her. But she's strong. And she asked about you." Susan let out a sob, the kind that came from somewhere deep. "When can I see her?" "Tomorrow morning. The doctors want to stabilize her tonight, but she's asking for you too." As Chun ended the call, Agent Webb approached with an update. "We've identified all 13 girls rescued today. They're from 6 different states, taken between 2003 and 2009. 6 were officially reported missing. The other 7 were classified as runaways. No one looked for them very hard." His voice was heavy. "The system failed them." "We failed them." Chun nodded quietly. "But we found them. And now we'll make sure the people responsible answer for all of it." Webb's expression didn't soften. "There's more." During questioning, Clean slipped up. Just before his lawyer shut him down, he said, "You found one facility, but you haven't found them all." Patterson's laptop backed it up. References to other properties. "Other locations. We may have shut down the northern facility," Webb said, "but this network is bigger than we thought." Chun felt it in her bones. 13 girls had been rescued. Several cold cases had been solved. But out there others could still be waiting, trapped, forgotten. The investigation wasn't over. Science had brought them this far: DNA, digital forensics, interagency cooperation, things that individual departments hadn't been able to do on their own. But the cost had been enormous. And the questions left behind were haunting. How many more people like Coach Patterson existed? Trusted figures hiding behind respected titles, using access to groom and isolate? How many more abandoned places were being used as cover? As Chun drove south through the frozen night towards Cedar Rapids, her thoughts returned to the words Melissa had carved into that metal door. "I am real. I exist." After 7 years of being treated like property, bartered, broken, and hidden, Melissa Brown had held on to something no one could erase: her identity. Tomorrow, she would see her mother again. The healing would begin. It would be long, uncertain, but it would begin. And tonight, for the first time in 7 years, Melissa Brown would sleep in a hospital bed, not a locked room. She would be warm, safe, and seen. The truth had finally come to light. Justice had begun. Minneapolis General Hospital. Room 412. Susan Brown stood outside the door, her hands shaking so badly the victim advocate beside her gently reached out to steady her. Through the window, she saw Melissa sitting up in bed. She looked so small, even at 21. Her hair was clean now, pulled back, her face familiar yet changed. Still her daughter, but also someone Susan hadn't had the chance to grow alongside. "There's no rush," said the advocate. "Take your time." But Susan had already waited 7 years. She opened the door. Melissa looked up. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Melissa whispered one word, the word Susan had longed to hear for 2,555 days. Mom? Susan crossed the room and wrapped her arms around her daughter. She felt how thin she was, how fragile. But Melissa clung to her with strength, crying into her shoulder the way she had after childhood nightmares. Only this time, the nightmare had been real. "I'm so sorry," Susan whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner. I searched everywhere, baby. I never stopped." "They told me you knew," Melissa said softly. "Patterson said you agreed. That I needed to be hidden. That you thought I was too rebellious. 4 months. I believed him. I was so angry at you." Susan pulled back just enough to meet her daughter's eyes. "I never knew. Not for 1 second. Losing you broke me. I thought you were gone. But if I'd known you were in that house—" "I know now," Melissa said. "The FBI told me everything. About the basement. About how you never stopped looking." She wiped her tears with shaky hands. "Mom, there are other girls. Girls whose families don't even know they're still alive. You have to help them. Like you helped me." Susan nodded, holding her tighter. "The FBI's working on it. Detective Chun found 13 of you. You're all safe now, but yes, there are more." Melissa's grip tightened. "When we were still at the farm, before they moved us to Minnesota, I heard Patterson and Clean talking about other places, other facilities, in 3 different states. The nightmare wasn't over, but for Melissa Brown and the 12 others rescued that day, it was finally ending. And for the first time in years, they weren't alone. Let me know if you'd like this structured into a YouTube script format, broken into episodes, or rewritten from a narrator's point of view for voiceover pacing. Wisconsin, Illinois, and somewhere they called the Southern Operation. Melissa's voice was quiet but certain. "Mom, if there were 13 girls in Minnesota, how many are still trapped in those other places?" Susan felt a deep chill settle in her chest. She pressed the call button. Moments later, Detective Chun entered the hospital room. She had waited outside, giving mother and daughter space for their reunion. Susan stood. "Melissa just told me there might be other locations. Wisconsin, Illinois, somewhere down south." Chun stepped closer, already pulling out her notebook. "Melissa, I need you to tell me everything you remember, anything, even the smallest detail." Melissa took a slow, shaky breath. "It was August 2003, back at the farm. I pretended to be asleep, but I heard them talking through the wall. Patterson was angry. He said someone named Mark thought the Wisconsin site was too risky, too close to a main road. But Clean insisted they keep it running. He said demand was rising." She hesitated, then continued. "They mentioned a doctor setting up the Illinois site, someone with experience in private clinics. I think his name was Sterling." Chun's pen stopped. "Did they say where?" "Patterson said something about Lake Geneva," Melissa said. "And Clean made a joke, he said, sterling quality, like it was supposed to be funny." Melissa looked down. "They laughed. About us. Like we were inventory." Chun stepped into the hall and immediately radioed Agent Webb. Within minutes, FBI teams were pulling property records from the Lake Geneva area and scanning medical licensing databases for any physician named Sterling with known ties to Clean or Patterson. Back in Cedar Rapids, Mark Brown sat alone in his living room, watching news coverage of the Minnesota raid. His wife, Linda, had gone to bed an hour earlier, exhausted after crying for hours over the news of her brother-in-law's arrest. Mark's phone buzzed. A message from his brother, Richard. "They're saying you built those rooms. Tell me it's not true." Mark stared at it, then deleted the message. He walked downstairs to his basement workshop. Behind a tool cabinet, he opened a hidden safe and pulled out a burner phone. He dialed a number from memory. "The operation is compromised," he said. "Minnesota is gone. They've got Patterson and Clean. I need extraction." The voice on the other end was cold and steady. "Extraction isn't possible. You knew the risks. Eliminate evidence and prepare your defense." "I have information," Mark said, panic rising. "I can give them names, locations. I want a deal." There was a pause. "Then you're on your own." The line went dead. Mark stared at the phone. He had nowhere to run. The FBI would find him. The evidence would bury him. His only chance now was to cooperate. And then, at 9:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. He looked through the window and saw FBI agents in windbreakers, waiting on his porch. His time was up. Agent Webb led the arrest personally. "You're under arrest, Mark Brown. You have the right to remain silent." Inside, forensic teams began searching the house. In Mark's workshop, they found exactly what they feared: blueprints for hidden rooms in multiple cities, receipts for soundproofing materials, and a laptop filled with encrypted files, data that would take time to unlock, but was clearly evidence of something much bigger. As agents escorted Mark to the vehicle, Webb spoke firmly. "You're being charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, human trafficking, and racketeering." He paused. "But here's what you need to understand. We know there are more facilities. We know more girls are out there. If you help us find them, I'll speak to the prosecutor. Maybe we can get your sentence reduced from life to 30 years with the possibility of parole." Mark turned his head. He saw Linda at the door, watching with heartbreak and disbelief. Neighbors stood in the street, whispering. Everything he had was already gone. He swallowed hard. "I'll talk," he said quietly. "But I want immunity for my wife." She didn't know. "That's not my call," Webb replied. "But I'll advocate for it." Now start with Wisconsin and Illinois. Back at the FBI field office, Mark Brown's 6-hour confession unfolded in grim detail. He told them how he met Robert Clean in 1997 at a contractors' convention, how Clean offered him well-paid side jobs installing special security rooms with no questions asked. "At first, I didn't know what they were for," Mark said. "But by 2000, I saw Patterson bringing teenage girls to the Iowa farm. I knew. And I kept building." Webb leaned in. "How many facilities?" Mark didn't hesitate. 7 total. He listed them: the Cedar Rapids basement, the Iowa farm outside Iowa City, the Minnesota hospital, 2 sites in Wisconsin, Lake Geneva and Green Bay, 1 in Rockford, Illinois, and 1 in southern Missouri. Near Branson, Chen felt a cold wave settle over her. The scope of what they were uncovering was far larger than they had feared, and they were only just beginning. 7 known facilities. That meant potentially dozens more victims still waiting to be found. Chun leaned in. "Are all of them still active?" Mark Brown's voice was flat. "The Missouri site shut down in 2007. The building was sold. I don't know what happened to the girls there." He paused. "The others were still operational as of 6 months ago." Agent Webb and Detective Chun exchanged a look. This was no longer just a regional investigation. It had become the largest trafficking operation uncovered in the Midwest in over 2 decades. The coordination, the number of people involved, the scale of harm, it was staggering. "Who else is involved?" Chun asked. "Besides Patterson, Clean, and Dr. Sterling?" Mark hesitated, then nodded, as if committing to full cooperation. "There's a lawyer in Chicago who handles adoption paperwork, a sheriff in Wisconsin who turns a blind eye during transfers, 3 other doctors who provide medical care across the network, and the money guy, the one who manages all the payments. They call him the accountant." He took a breath. "His real name is Thomas Wetherb. I live in Des Moines." The confession continued deep into the night. By dawn, FBI task forces across 4 states were mobilized. Search warrants were issued. Tactical teams were briefed. At 8 a.m. sharp, over 200 federal agents moved in, executing coordinated raids on every known facility within a 15-minute window, leaving no time for anyone to warn the others. The results were heartbreaking. 8 victims were rescued from a facility near Green Bay. 6 more from Lake Geneva. 11 in Rockford, including 2 sisters missing since 2005. By the end of the day, 38 additional young women had been freed. Their ages ranged from 16 to 24. Some had been held for months. Others, like Melissa, had been trapped for nearly a decade. Detective Chun stood in the Rockford facility, watching paramedics assist the rescued girls, some in shock, others too weak to stand. The rooms were nearly identical to what she'd seen in Susan Brown's basement. That was the most chilling part. Each location followed the same layout, the same features. Whoever built this had created a blueprint for human trafficking, one that hid in plain sight under the cover of medical treatment or protective custody. Chun's phone rang. It was Susan. I just saw the news, she said. 38 more girls. All because we found Melissa? Chun swallowed hard. Yes, because you never gave up, Mrs. Brown, because you kept asking questions when no one else would. At Minneapolis General, Melissa watched the same news coverage from her hospital bed. Her eyes filled with tears as she saw girls, one she remembered, being helped into ambulances, wrapped in blankets. They were finally safe. Victim advocate Rachel Martinez sat beside her. They're free because of you, she said softly. Your journal, your voice, you made this possible. Melissa shook her head. They're free because my mom believed I was still out there, because she found that room. Then she looked up, her eyes sharp with a mix of grief and purpose. But how many didn't make it? How many girls disappeared before anyone noticed? It was a question no one could answer. Not yet. The crematorium found at the Minnesota site suggested the truth would be hard to face, but tonight, 51 young women were alive, rescued. After more than a decade of silence, the network was being dismantled piece by piece. What started as a search for one missing girl had exposed something no one expected. A trafficking ring operating across 4 states, using real institutions, using trusted people, coaches, businessmen, contractors, doctors, even law enforcement, people with authority, people who should have protected, but the system that had once failed these girls was now fighting back. Through science, forensics, collaboration, and the resilience of survivors like Melissa, who refused to let their identities disappear. As Chun prepared to return to Cedar Rapids for the preliminary hearings, she reflected on the journey. Susan Brown's relentless search, Melissa's name scratched into a steel door. 30-8. Other mothers now receiving phone calls they never thought would come. The truth had been hidden in basements, disguised behind institutional walls, protected by people with power. But Chun had learned the truth doesn't stay buried forever. And now, justice was finally within reach. The federal courthouse in Cedar Rapids had never seen a case of this size. Security lines wrapped around the block. Victims' families, media crews, and concerned citizens gathered, drawn by the weight of what had been uncovered. Inside courtroom 4A, 23 defendants sat at the defense tables. They faced 472 federal charges, including conspiracy, kidnapping, trafficking, racketeering, and exploitation. David Patterson wore an orange jumpsuit, his face pale after 8 months in custody. Beside him sat Robert Klein, Mark Brown, Dr. Gerald Sterling, Sheriff Dennis Coleman, and 18 others. each one accused of playing a part in a network that had stolen the lives of more than 50 young women. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michelle Rodriguez stood before the jury. Her opening statement was clear. For 12 years, these defendants operated a criminal enterprise targeting vulnerable girls, hiding behind respected titles and inflicting pain under the guise of protection. She paused, her voice steady. And today that enterprise ends. They used positions of trust coaches, doctors, law enforcement officers, and contractors to target vulnerable girls. They built hidden rooms in basements and abandoned buildings. They forged documents, bribed officials, and created an infrastructure designed for one chilling purpose: to traffic human beings. Susan Brown sat in the front row of the courtroom gallery, her hand tightly clasped around Melissa's. Her daughter had insisted on attending every day of the trial despite her therapist's concerns. "I need to see their faces," Melissa had said. "I need them to see mine." Over 6 weeks, the prosecution built its case methodically. FBI agents testified about the coordinated raids across 4 states. Forensic accountants traced over $2.3 million funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts. Digital forensic experts walked the jury through Patterson's laptop, showing files that documented every stage of the operation, from abduction to transport to sale. Each witness, each piece of evidence helped paint a picture that was impossible to deny, but the most powerful testimony came from the survivors on a crisp October morning. Almost exactly 7 years after she vanished, Melissa Brown took the stand. She wore a simple blue dress. Her hair was tied back. Her posture was upright, even though her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the wooden edge of the witness stand. Prosecutor Michelle Rodriguez approached gently. "Miss Brown, can you tell the jury what happened on October 15, 2002? Melissa's voice was steady, clearer and stronger than anyone expected. "I stayed late after basketball practice. Coach Patterson offered to drive me home because my mom was working late." She paused. "I trusted him. He'd been my coach since 8th grade. She glanced toward Patterson, who sat still at the defense table, eyes fixed on the floor. "But he didn't take me home. He drove to my house, used the key my mom gave him, and took me to the basement. He said men were following me, that I needed to hide until police caught them." Melissa looked straight ahead. "He locked me in a room I didn't know existed in my own house." Rodriguez continued gently. "How long were you kept there?" 5 months, Melissa said. "From October 2002 to March 2003. She gripped the stand tighter. "He came twice a day. He brought food and more lies. He said my mom knew I was there. He showed me fake reports, told me my dad had stopped searching. He isolated me mentally before. He moved me physically." Excerpts from Melissa's journal were read aloud. Jurors wiped tears as the words of a confused 14-year-old girl echoed through the courtroom. Passages filled with hurt, disbelief, and the slow unraveling of trust. Rodriguez asked, "What happened in March 2003? "He moved me to a farm near Iowa City," Melissa said. "There were 12 other girls. We were in separate rooms, but we could sometimes hear each other crying at night." She took a shaky breath. "Patterson and Clean told us we were being prepared for placement with families who would take better care of us than our parents had. They called it rehabilitation." She looked directly at the jury, but it wasn't that. It was conditioning, teaching us to be silent, to be invisible. "Were you harmed physically?" "We were starved, denied medical care, punished with isolation if we resisted." She paused. "And some girls had it worse. I heard screaming, then silence. They told us those girls had graduated, but we knew better." The defense tried to challenge her during cross-examination, suggesting her memories were confused by trauma, that she misunderstood Patterson's intentions, but Melissa didn't flinch. I was 14 years old, locked in a basement, then transferred between facilities for 7 years, she said, her voice calm but firm. I didn't misunderstand anything. I understood exactly what was happening. I was being treated like property. And I survived by holding on to who I was. Over the following days, 12 other survivors testified. Jennifer Martinez, missing since 1999. Kayla Henderson, who spent 6 years in captivity. Ashley Chun, rescued from Green Bay, who described how Dr. Sterling forged adoption paperwork and sold her to a couple in Chicago for $28,000. The defense argued some defendants didn't know the full scope or were just following instructions. Mark Brown's attorney claimed his client thought he was building security rooms. Sheriff Coleman's lawyer said he had been manipulated. But the evidence told a different story. Emails, texts, financial records, recorded phone calls. They proved the entire network was intentional, coordinated, and deeply corrupt. After 8 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 7 hours. They returned guilty verdicts on all 472 counts against all 23 defendants. The courtroom filled with emotion, tears, relief, release. Patterson sat still. Clean closed his eyes. Mark Brown lowered his head to the defense table. Judge Barbara Morrison addressed the court during sentencing. Her words were clear and unshaken. In 30 years on the bench, I have never seen crimes of this scale and cruelty, she said. These defendants used trust as a weapon. They exploited the vulnerable, and they profited from pain. David Patterson was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms with no chance of parole. Robert Clean received 12 life sentences. Dr. Gerald Sterling was given 10 life sentences. Mark Brown, who chose to cooperate, received 40 years, with a possibility of parole after 30. Sheriff Coleman was sentenced to 35 years. The remaining defendants received terms between 15 and 40 years. Depending on their involvement. Judge Morrison spoke directly from the bench. Your actions destroyed childhoods, shattered families, and betrayed the communities that trusted you. These sentences reflect the gravity of your crimes and this society's promise that such evil will not go unpunished. You will spend the rest of your lives in federal prison. And that is exactly what you deserve. As the bailiffs led them away, Melissa felt something shift inside her. A weight she had carried for 7 years finally lifted. The truth had come out. Justice had been served. And she believed, 3 months later on a sunny January afternoon, the community of Cedar Rapids gathered at Ellis Park for a memorial ceremony. 51 trees were planted in a semicircle, one for each survivor. In the center stood a granite memorial stone etched with the words, "Truth cannot stay buried forever." Over 2,000 people attended. Mayor Catherine Walsh addressed the crowd. Today, we remember the young women who endured what no one ever should. We honor their survival, their courage, and their resilience. And we commit together not to look away again. Susan Brown stood beside the stone, hand in hand with Melissa. They wore matching purple ribbons, the color of Melissa's journal. Now a quiet symbol of survival and strength. Susan spoke next. Her voice was steady. 7 years ago, my daughter disappeared from our home. For 7 years I searched, never knowing she was closer than I ever imagined. The pain of that loss, the guilt of not finding her sooner, will stay with me forever. She paused, then continued. But today, I stand with Melissa alive and healing, and with 50 other families whose daughters came home, because we never stopped looking, because investigators never gave up, because science and persistence beat back the dark. Melissa stepped forward. Her voice was clear. To everyone who searched for us, who believed in us when others assumed we were gone, thank you. You saved our lives. She looked at the survivors standing nearby, some holding hands, others with arms wrapped around family, and to the girls who didn't survive, whose names are carved into this stone, we remember you. Your lives mattered. You are not forgotten. The final tree was planted, a white oak, chosen for its strength and long life. Melissa and Susan planted it together, their hands on the same shovel, working in rhythm just like they had in their backyard garden. Before everything changed, 6 months after the trial, Melissa enrolled at the University of Iowa to study social work. The months before had been filled with intensive therapy, slow healing, and learning how to move through a world that had changed. While she was gone, the university offered support. Victim services helped her adjust. Susan had sold the house in Maple Grove. She couldn't live in a place with that basement. Instead, she found a small ranch-style home on the other side of town. Open floor plan, big windows, nothing hidden. On weekends, she and Melissa gardened together again, coaxing life from the soil. That spring, the Melissa Brown Foundation was launched. Funded by seized assets and donations, it provided trauma care for trafficking survivors, law enforcement training, and support for policy change to protect at-risk youth. Melissa served on the board, channeling pain into something with purpose. Detective Chun received formal commendation from the FBI, but what mattered more to her came later at the FACE Foundation's first annual fundraiser. 12 survivors presented her with a framed photo of all 51 girls standing together, their arms linked, their eyes full of quiet strength. Below it, an inscription read, "You gave us our lives back. We will never forget." On a warm August evening in 2010, Susan and Melissa sat on their back porch watching fireflies dance across the yard. Melissa had just finished her first semester of college. Straight A's, despite everything. She'd even started dating a kind, respectful engineering student who never pushed for answers she wasn't ready to give. "Mom," she asked softly, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd sold the house earlier? If you never found that room?" Susan paused. "I think about it every day," she said. "But I also think about all the times I almost gave up. All the moments when hope felt ridiculous." She reached out and took Melissa's hand. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was just plain stubbornness. But whatever it was, it kept me going, and it was enough. Melissa squeezed her hand. 51 girls are free because you didn't give up. Because your love broke through something that lasted 12 years. Susan shook her head gently. "No," she said. "They're free because you survived. Because you wrote in that journal. Because you scratched your name into that door and refused to let them erase you." She smiled through her tears. "You saved yourself, Melissa. I just helped you find your way home." The fireflies blinked on in the quiet. Tiny points of light breaking through the dark. Inside, the house was still. No locked rooms. No secrets hiding in the corners. Only open windows and laughter drifting in from a nearby yard. The nightmare was over. The healing would take time, maybe a lifetime. But mother and daughter had found each other again. And in that reunion, something unbreakable had taken root. Hope had survived captivity. Truth had outlived the lies. And love, fierce, relentless, enduring, had brought Melissa Brown home. She was real. She existed. And finally, she was free.